Hello everyone, it's Chris at Garage Times, working on this 3.6 liter Pentastar engine on a 2018 Chrysler Pacifica. Gonna be swapping out the OEM engine oil cooler filter housing. So here we go. Gonna take off this cover first, here. And that basically is just two T30 bolts. And then you just pull her up and there'll be a couple little sets there, little, like you pop it, we have to pop it off here. So I can turn this over so you can see. There you go. What I did next was I took an 8mm socket and loosened that so that would come off, and then 10mm for that bolt. And then basically all you have to do then is just get you got to be gentle, of course, but just get a little bit of a prying action up, because that's just kind of like snap down on two little plugs. And then what you do, you pop that up off that, see? And once you get that all loosened and popped off back there, then you just kind of work it off this. You just work it off this edge and it pops right off. And as you're pulling that out, actually be kind of careful, because there is a connector on the bottom side on the right. Once you get her pulled up high enough to where you can see. So you got to kind of reach down in there to get that connector off. And that's the connector there. But so just be careful. And then don't sweat these little connectors. I mean, I try to save every single one that I can, but I end up having to cut that one, those push pin connector zip tie things. And just go ahead and get yourself, this is what I would do if you're gonna be doing this kind of stuff. Get yourself like a kit that's got all kinds of, push button connectors, and get yourself some zip ties, and it'll be perfect when you're done. I can go ahead and pop up this air dam cover here. I got it partially popped here. Pops out of there. There's a couple connectors here. One on top you disconnect, and then this one below this EGR looking thing. And then like a vent tube. And then it just pops out of this here. Just kind of keep working it back, looking for where it's kind of hung up, to where you can kind of push stuff out of the way. So. And to remove this clip, you gotta get a pick under that and kind of pry it out, and then pull it off. You want to try to get this, if you can see it. See that stud down there? That nut there. It's kind of hard to get the camera in there, but it's that one right there. You gotta get that off. The upper, it looks like the upper intake manifold is bolted there to that. After you get that nut off, that 10mm nut on that stud, then to the right, there's another bolt you got to get out there for that bracket. Got that other bolt out of that bracket, and I also ended up loosening this vent tube off the air intake, or I'm sorry, off the, above your filter housing. And then I also removed this line that goes back to that connection too. They're just basically, you just push down on it, give her a push, and it'll pop off. And I was gonna try to leave this basically your throttle assembly together. You could take it off, I guess, to get to those bolts easier down there that we just did, but I'm just gonna try to leave it on if I can, and then disconnected that plug for it. Oh, here we go. Getting closer here. I've removed these, or loosened these 7 upper intake manifold bolts, 8mm, and then removed, there is, let me just look here, yep, there's that hole there on the right, there's a bolt there holding the upper intake on, and then there's another one over here to the left you got to remove, and it's that hole right there, right next to that white or silver bolt. There's a hole, so there's one on each side there. And then I think we're getting there. I don't know if I said before, I haven't done one of these before, so it does kind of move a little bit. So I'm just gonna check everything over, and then I gotta remove this upper hose here. My bad on that. Found another bolt there, so it'd be like 8. I still gotta loosen that one down there on the right. Upper intake manifold. Basically, that's the trick. Just take your time, make sure you got all your bolts out, especially if you've not done it before. You know, all the vehicles are different. So this, I removed that constant tension clamp on that hose, and I'm just gonna take a pick and just get in here around this edge, and I'm gonna loosen it up, and then I'll put some, maybe some lubricant on it. I'll work on that. So it is free. When you guys go to do yours, these 2 knobs that stick out here were those bolts in the front that you removed. That ends up hanging up on this. It like hangs up on this inside lip, so it's kind of like deceiving at first. You're like, man, what am I hung up on? But that's definitely hanging up there. Once you kind of pry this left side up and out, then you're dealing with basically the hose still being connected, which you can't really twist it up yet because this stud is still kind of, if I can get this up for you, this stud, that stud there, hang on just a sec, I'll get a better view of it. There it is, that one there, it's hanging up, and basically it's hanging up through that upper bracket hole, and it looks like I didn't necessarily need to remove that bottom bolt below it, because it allowed, I thought that whole bracket would come up and that other part would hold it there, but you just gotta do that top one, wiggle her out, you know, wiggle the whole the upper intake to the left, and then once you get it over to the left a little bit, then you can rock it up, and then once you start rocking it up, you can kind of twist that hose off that. So these are T20s to get this lower intake manifold off, and then the fuel rail is held on by like T30s, and you don't have to take the fuel rail off, but I just couldn't get my hands in there and trying to squeeze on those clips. These clips here, I got them kind of pushed out to the side, but like these red locks on them, and then trying to squeeze them to pull them off, I just didn't have enough room, so really didn't want to have to take the fuel rail off, but did anyway. So yeah, gonna try to clean stuff up here and go from there. Oh yeah, when I was trying to get this lower intake out, I had to, you know, there's some plugs on the right of it that you'll have to mess with, that I was like, man, what's that? So you got this one, this is like the receiving end, and then there's the other part that goes into it, but then this whole part slides on and off this here. So this would be a great time if you did want to change your injectors out, you could. And you know, I'm not sure if I'll do that, because it wasn't too bad getting in here to get to this, but you know, it does take a little bit. And I'm gonna definitely clean up all these O-rings and clean everything out really good. Be pretty persistent with it. I ended up taking the coolant line off the cooler, and you know, I only lost a couple ounces of coolant. I'm gonna try to clean that up a little bit. but yeah, hardly any out of this hose here, and I just kind of propped it up. I didn't even need to put a plug in it. I just did. Yeah, so it wasn't like it was squirting out or nothing. I quickly just oriented that hose up and we're good to go. So I did see and read that people were draining their coolant systems, so unless I find something else on the way in here, I'll let you know. But so far so good. I did end up cutting that this year because that coolant hose had this wrapped around it, and I couldn't get under there to pry that off or out. Maybe you'll be able to, but I just gotta pick under here carefully, you know, make sure I don't poke my coolant hose. That coolant hose here that I oriented up, and got it far enough, you know, a gap, and then I took some side cutters and I just cut that open. And I'll just replace that. So we ended up, like I had said earlier, I did not drain the coolant and I did not drain the oil. So some folks might be yelling at me on here, but I did have this out already once, and then it was getting late, and then I was like, I guess I'll tackle the rest of it tomorrow. So I reinstalled it for the night, but I'm gonna pull it back out. And when I did pull it out, I just had a little bit of coolant out of that hose where that constant tension clamps on there. But what I did have is, it does seep out of the coolant passages that are underneath this. It seeps out very slow, like, you know, there's a really good vacuum on it or something. But so what I'm gonna do is, you know, I mean, maybe the correct way is to drain the coolant so you're not dealing with it. And the oil wasn't too bad, and I was able to clean up a lot of it in the reservoir. It really wasn't bad, but the coolant kept seeping out to where when I was cleaning it up, it was kind of a little bit of a pain. So what I'm gonna do is, it comes out so slow, I'm just gonna have my son plug it with his fingers. There's two passages for the coolant that I see that were like seeping out, and I'm just gonna have him plug it with his fingers, and we're gonna swap over the new one. And another thing that I found out, I did a review on this, and it's, like I said, it was a really nice, pretty heavy duty, you know, I'm pretty impressed with it, right? Well, so if you are gonna do this, just make sure that you get the right one, because on mine, it does not have this temp sensor. So if you look down there, I do not have the temp sensor. It's just a empty hole there and like a plug on the inside there somewhere. But so what I did is I quickly read and researched. It looks like this may work. Somebody said that they tried it, but this temp sensor was in the way on theirs, on their new part, and it wouldn't, like the intake, the upper intake wouldn't, I'm sorry, the lower intake wouldn't seat properly. So I put it on there, and it looks like it seats properly. It doesn't interfere and it doesn't touch it. So you can get a plug for them too, but I'm just thinking I'm just gonna leave the sensor in there and as the plug. So all right, well, let's get to it. So, and I don't know if that cooler not being the exact same one is because this is a limited, Chrysler Pacifica limited. The only other post that I found that had bought this, or bought the full aluminum body, said that it didn't work for him is because it was, his was a limited like mine. So I don't know if that has something to do with not having that temp sensor. And just confirming, those are E8 like Torx E8. And as you can see, we've removed that, and then just with a little bit of fluid that was down there, I as you can see, just stuffed paper towel in there to kind of sop it up, clean it up. Just keep doing it till she's all clean, and have your helper just keep plugging those holes with the fingers. It doesn't come squirting out or nothing, but it does seep a little bit, as you can see. Okay, there it is in, and I torqued them to 106 inch-pounds. That's what I found, but please do your own research on your torque specs just to be sure. The I'm getting ready to put that coolant hose on, but before I did, I popped out that old like zip tie combo stay rivet thing, and I just put one of my that kit that I showed you, just had one that would fit perfectly in there, nice and snug. It'll hold that wiring harness down, and then I'll zip tie an adequate zip tie for that coolant hose, and I'll just tie it to that there. So all right, keep marching on here. And I did use one of these like coolant sucker things for cleaning that up. You could use like a turkey baster, but this thing kind of flops around, so it was easy to kind of get into wherever I needed to kind of clean stuff up. I also swapped over my original oil pressure sensor on the bottom there, and I oriented the clip kind of up so it'd be easier to get off for me or the next guy. It was not, when I took it off, it was oriented upside down. The other thing I did is just want to make note of, this is what came with it. It looks like the exact same one, but the reason why I swapped it out and took this new one off was because people had complained that they had oil pressure sensor codes after installation with this one. So I took that one off and put my old one on, see what happens. The other thing that I noticed is that they didn't use any thread sealant at all. So on the original equipment manufacturer housing, there's thread sealant. This aluminum one didn't have any. Not sure what's going on with that. Some comedic irony for you there. Just seems like that's all you're ever working on. You know what I'm saying? And I didn't pick it on purpose. The wife was throwing it away, so I was like, hey, I'll use that. And one more thing is, on certain manufacturers that sell these, they send you, some of them will send you a plug so that you could remove this if you wanted and throw a plug in there. Mine, however, they did not send the plug. Got the lower intake installed, and the lower intake gaskets on the bottom side of this are installed. Just lubed them up a little bit before I installed them. I got to install new ones on top here. Yeah, if you don't have the Torx bit for those Torx screws, I mean, not necessarily recommending it, but I did use just an 8mm socket because I didn't have the adapter to go from like 3/8 to 1/4 inch, or from 1/4 inch to 3/8. So I just gotta screw down the fuel rails with those 4 Torx, and I'll be back with you. Bolted down the fuel rail with those T30s, and then reconnected all my fuel injectors. Don't forget, on the right side of your lower intake manifold, there's this plastic slide over bracket. Make sure you put that back on as well. I ended up installing the new ones. Everything's good. I'm gonna pull my napkins, and then I did install the fuel line there to the end. And I don't know if I mentioned, I did 109 inch-pounds is what I found for the torque spec for that, but yeah, definitely inspect it for yourself. So far so good. I torqued this upper intake manifold to like 89 inch-pounds. There it says 7 Newton meters, whichever you prefer. I got this brake vacuum line connected on this side and then routed around the back. The stuff is pretty easy to figure out where it goes back to. A lot of times, almost all the time, you know, the stuff only goes one way, but it's always good to double check everything. I'll get connecting some more stuff here. I highly recommend get yourself an assortment of different weird tools to fish stuff out when you drop it inside the cavities of this vehicle, because they got that, the whole bottom of it is covered with like a air baffle carpeting, so you'd have to take it all apart. So yeah, get yourself some, and definitely some long grabbers like these things. This long silver thing, really awesome. Just give her a squeeze on this end, like this. They're just wonderful to have. Let you grab stuff with it. These constant tension clamps are brutal. I do like, I guess they're designed, but I just hate when I guess I hate their maneuverability. Once you pinch them together, they just don't want to slide either way on the hose. And then just reconnect this vent hose. And reconnect this upper connector. And then that connector. And then your connector over here. Get a shot of that. Yeah, that one. Just right on the back side of this, right below it. Then reconnect this connector from back there all the way up to here. So I installed this next. 10mm bolt there for the tie down, and it just snaps down on that lug back there when you push down on it. And then you use a flathead or whatever for that. And then there is a connection below here. You just gotta plug that in. And then also I don't know if you're in the same boat I'm in, but I just end up zip tying that to the plastic. There was like an electrical one where it pushes through there and it wraps around there, kind of like factory, but that zip tie will be good enough. And then here, I ended up, when I took this apart, for whatever reason, this one was broke. And so I was just like, well, I'm gonna try to find that white locking mechanism and replace that part so it'll permanently lock it. But in the meantime, I'm just throwing me a zip tie on there, a zip tie over here, and then one or two in the between, just kind of put some tension on that. It does still, with that in there, it still does lock, but I just was kind of wanting some insurance on that until I can find that part. Installation of this vent hose and line just clips back into there, and then I snap it in the upper rail there. So it is fired up and running. Sounds really good. I don't have any leaks. I'll definitely be eyeballing down there just to make sure. We'll let it run a while just to double check everything. Don't forget to top off your fluids if you're low. My oil was perfect. It didn't get low. I didn't lose maybe a couple ounces of oil or so. And I might have lost a maximum of a half a quart of coolant max, so there's still, I could add a half quart or so in there. So it's been running for like a half hour now, no issues, and all the fluid levels are okay and good. So not a job that I would say that I'm really in love with. I would say not really in love with doing this kind of job. Just because of just kind of how it worked out, but definitely not a big deal, and I wouldn't be afraid of doing it. You know what I mean? Like, you can do it for sure, but just take your time, be easy with all your connections. If you want to make it easy on yourself, then drain your fluids too. That. I did see a video where a guy he didn't drain his fluids like I did, and he did have like a NOx sensor code that came up, an engine code. So, he contributed it to possibly being like, because the coolant got on it or whatever. So, that's a consideration. But on the other hand, if you have help or somebody can plug those holes, or you got somebody or something that can plug the holes temporarily, I think you'd be okay. And I checked the vehicle, there's no engine codes, nothing going on with that. So I'm gonna try to do this in one video. I'm gonna try to, because right now it's in two, but I'm gonna try to clip them together and do it as one. But if not, this will be like the part 2, and then the part 1 will be the other one. And well, I guess until next time, you guys keep wrenching, have a good one. I hope this video was helpful to somebody out there, and see you guys later. Bye.